because I'm assuming they have birth control in the future. Hello, welcome to Sound and Fury Book Reviews. As usual, I am Tina. Today I am doing a book review of the quintessential sci-fi classic, Dune by Frank Herbert. So this book, if you don't know, came out in 1965. That was 20 years before I was born. So you can do the math on how old I am. I also want to point out that I just realized that my shirt matches the fire in the background. I hope that's not distracting, and that wasn't intentional. Anyway, so I am treating this book review like one of my classic sci-fi book reviews. So I'm going to start with a general review, my feelings about the new movie, and I'm going to do a deep dive into the way that women are treated in the novel, because it's an interesting contradiction derived, as I will get into, by the time period in which the book was written. So, Dune, little personal history here, was one of the first sci-fi books I ever read. I was 14 or 15 when my dad gave me his copy, not this copy, he wouldn't let me keep it. I'm assuming if you watch my lowly channel, you've seen the Man Carrying Things sketch about dads who read Dune in the 80s. I think he posted that a couple weeks ago. If not, check that out. It's really funny, and it's pretty much my dad. I thought that was great. Anyway, at the time of first reading Dune in the year, 2000, I was positively enthralled by it, despite its rather dry tone and heavy political focus. I've read it about 4 times since, but not for about 10 years. I've also seen the David Lynch movie a few times because my dad loved it. Not because of that. Or maybe. All this is to say, I know Dune quite a bit. Yet, upon a reread, I have noticed certain elements that I either didn't pick up on past reads, or I didn't take the time to unpack. Will I be unpacking them in this video? Maybe. Is this a promise or a curse? Can it be both? I'm sorry about this noise in the background. I'm being attacked by a giant sandworm. No, it's my dog, Denny. He has like kennel cough or something. Anyway, let's start with the writing. Herbert definitely employs a more classical style in his writing, while at the same time playing with point of view. So Dune jumps perspectives mid-paragraph using a truly omniscient third person. At first it's a little bit confusing, but I adapted to it quite quickly, and a lot of the tension of the novel comes from knowing what the villains are planning and how people are misinterpreting or hiding things from one another. So in fact, I think it's actually quite brilliant. I think the way that he managed to do this and make it coherent is really well done. Herbert is a great writer, like he is. I have another one of his books. If you follow me on Instagram, which you should because I post lots of bookish pictures, I have this book as well of his, the Book of Frank Herbert, which is really good. It's a collection of short stories. I highly recommend if you can find a copy that you do. And look at the cover. The cover's gorgeous. Look at those dogs. Anyway, the reason why I think that Dune is a classic is because of the imagination behind the story and the world building. Arrakis is a fantastic setting. The way the spice ties the economy to the Empire and to the Fremen is understandable and quite simple, but it's all the details of the universe that build it out and make it so interesting. The Bene Gesserit and the other kinds of invented technology throughout make it a richly conceived world that feels real, and also giant freaking sandworms. Honestly, the setting is a 5 out of 5 stars. The setting is absolutely fantastic. I will say, though, that the betrayal at the start, when it comes to plot, hits very hollow. We barely know this person, nor do we get any real scenes of them interacting with the Atreides to show how close they are. So it isn't a hard-hitting betrayal. We also don't learn much about the retainers of the house that Paul seems to care so deeply for. I still mix up Idaho, Gurney Halleck, and Thufir Hawat while reading, because other than their professions, they're kind of the same person. Keynes is one of the best characters, as is Alia, whom we see only a little. Yet, despite how little we do know of the people, we do care about them. And it's weird. They don't have a lot of depth, but at the same time, they kind of do it. It's an interesting way of developing characters. The story flows quickly, and most of the book involves scenes of action or intrigue, so it's easy to follow and easy to read and easy to become wrapped by. I still had a great time reading it. The novel features a chosen one storyline, which I used to enjoy, but now in my old age, I find it quick cliche and kind of irritating. At least in this one, he isn't just born into it like a space Jesus or something, but is a product of deliberate genetic manipulation on his mother's part. On top of this aspect, though, kind of building on it, there's this whole kind of white savior complex, which was a problem with narratives from this time period specifically. The white savior complex, if you don't know, simply put, is the idea that a white person can travel to a country or area of the world, developing countries usually, and almost always those that have already suffered a history of colonialism, to try and save the people there. But this saving, even if it is good-hearted or not with the intent to colonize, is itself a colonization attempt. It's not it's a complicated issue, and I'm actually not going to get into it in this review. If you're interested, you can, just do a Google search white savior complex Dune and it'll come up there. There's articles, there's scholarly articles about it. When I was in university, we took a genre class, and one of the books that I got to read Neuromancer. Someone else read Dune, and they did their whole presentation on this concept. So yeah, but I'm not going to reiterate their essay in my review here. Regarding the story itself, one big thing I still don't understand is how the Fremen, who, from what we see of their society, are rather pedestrian in terms of technology, yet they manage to manufacture better still suits than off-worlders, which are intricately designed pieces of technology. Likewise, well, it said they live in these caves and cities as well. What is their education system like? For example, aspects of their society are not given to us, since we only see Paul basically hanging around in the caves. This feels exceptionally lacking given how much detail is afforded the other aspects of the novel. In fact, it feels a bit reductive of their culture, and it's a little bit kind of irksome, maybe problematic. I'm not sure. One thing that also is very problematic about the book is how the Baron is both bisexual and obese, which seems to be included as ways to make him appear more monstrous. If we didn't have a history, a very long and terrible history of vilifying or mocking gay and fat people, this wouldn't be an issue. But given he's the villain and the only large person and the only LGBTQ plus person in the book, it's definitely not a positive representation. I'm very curious as to how the new movie will handle it, as the Lynch one handled it abhorrently. Just doubled down on the terribleness of it. So, that's the thing, though, about reading classic sci-fi. There are things about it that are going to be problematic because of the time period in which it was written. Obviously, we can't give, Herbert a pass for this, but at the same time, we can understand what was happening. It was a societal problem, not just one man. Hopefully that makes sense. So the final act of the book I found wraps up too quickly. There's far less time on the battles than I would have liked, though the novel is already a beast, so maybe that's a good thing. Quite frankly, if the book had less prophecy and less Paul's fancy powers and more fighting, it would have worked better for me overall. I'm giving it a 3 to 5 stars. I gave it a 4 stars going into it. That's what I originally gave it. But I must say that I'll always say that I love Dune, it's more of a nostalgic joy kind of thing. I, associate it with my first bout into science fiction, and the things that it inspired gives me, it still gives me a warm feeling despite some of the problematic elements. In terms of narrative craft, I think it requires more character development to make me really care for the people, less problematic elements, as I said, which would also help create a villain that is more substance than shock, which he tends to be kind of more shocking. And, I need more war and less caves, because caves are boring and they're full of spiders. So that's the end of my review, my regular review with no spoilers. So now I'm going to talk a little bit, for a second, about the new movie. And then I'm going to talk about the role of women in the book, because it's very fascinating. So, the new movie. I'm very excited for the new movie, mainly because the Lynch film skimped over the Bene Gesserit aspects quite a bit, and I'm hoping a modern retelling of the story will give us more Alia and a Rulon, put more women in the background as soldiers and etc., and expand Chani's role a bit more. I'm basically hoping that this movie will modernize it a bit. The casting actually looks great. Timothy Chardonnay, or whatever his name is a great choice, because he's a good actor that looks younger than he is. And quite frankly, bumping Paul to be 18 or 20 would be better than having him be 15. And the rest of the men, look like good matches based on their posters. I also like that they gender bent Keynes and made her a woman of color. That's great, especially given Chani is Keynes' daughter. So it works then that we have Zendaya as Chani. And I also hope they give her a bit more to do. I'm not a big trailer person. I only watch teasers, so I didn't watch the whole thing. But I'm very excited for this movie, and it'll be the first one I go to the theater since COVID. So I'm dragging my husband along for the ride. He likes Dune too, but I don't think he's ever read it. So I'm going to jump into a discussion of women in the novel now. Now, don't get me wrong, this is going to be a teardown of the novel, but it's a thoughtful critique. You know, it is important, I think, to look at old books and talk about the things that are, you know, not wrong or even problematic, but just like dated about them and why this is an issue and how they could have been handled better to make us better readers and writers in the future. So, Dune does feature, though, several strong female characters. Strong in this case, meaning they have agency, they contribute to the plot, and they have personality, and some of them are physically strong. Alia is the one who kills the Baron, and Chani and Jessica are treated with respect by their partners, which is great to see. The novel passes the Bechdel test in the first chapter. That actually surprised me. I completely forgot about the whole Jam Habar thing. In fact, I would argue this book was ahead of its time in how it handled its female characters, and is one of the reasons why it has such a following. I mean, that's why I probably liked it when I was 15, because I could understand. I was like, oh, Chani's 15. I could be a cool sandworm writer. Yeah. I'm going to start this whole thing with the last line of the entire book, which is, while we, Chani, we who carry the name concubine, history will call us wives. The final line encapsulates all that is wrong with the way women and gender roles are approached in the novel. It's annoying contradiction because you have all these strong female characters that are important to the book in a sense. I'm going to get into that. But then there's this whole kind of mess of traditional gender roles that I'm going to unpack. Before I get into that, though, who are these women? Let me remind you. Because I am assuming that a lot of you have read the book in years past and haven't reread it because the new movie's coming out, though I'm assuming that's why there's been a resurgence in the book lately. So, we have Jessica, Chani, Alia, Hera, whatever her name is, Irulan, and Mother Helen Gaius. There's also the Countess Fenring and the single woman business owner near the start, and a few randos like serving women or other Fremen. There are no women soldiers, pilots, or spice workers. This is always something that annoys me in future set stories because, yes, giving women positions of power and meaningful plot contributions is great, but showing diverse and gender-balanced society is almost more important. They did it in Alien, that's only a few years older than this novel, so I don't see why he couldn't have done it here. Anyway. I would argue, though, other than Alia's murder of the Baron, the women don't really drive the plot, though, in the story. Jessica, for all her power, does nothing really to move the story of her own accord. She assists the Duke in ruling, sure. She is unaware of being a pawn in the Duke's political intrigue to sniff out the spy. And when they hit book 2, she basically plays second fiddle to Paul after her one cool fight with Stilgar. She is one of the better developed characters in the novel simply because she has a lot of page time. But in truth, aside from producing Alia, she doesn't do much for the plot. Becoming a Reverend Mother isn't even a choice of hers. It's something that is forced upon her. Relating to being a mother, this is all the women are really good for in the novel in the end. It bothers me. Chani, whom I recall liking a lot when I was in my teens because she rides science worms and can fight and runs around with the Fremen scouts, is quickly relegated to simply the mother of Paul's child, whom he can banish to the city or to safety at his whim. This is also frustrating. In truth, Chani is not important to the story other than being Paul's wife and the mother of his children. Just as Jessica is also only important really as her proximity to the men in her life. Like, she's important because she was the Duke's concubine, and she's important because she's Paul's mother. She doesn't really have her own plot because her only goal in the story is to be a good wife to the Duke. She kind of abandons her Bene Gesserit goals. And we don't really understand why. Is it because the love of this man changed her? We don't know. And that is why I don't think that she is as good of a character as she could have been. This whole thing, though, also ties into my question about the Fremen from before in my review. How does the society function? Clearly attending school or high education is not important. Though, without engineering or science, how do they create still suits? I say this because Chani, at only 15, is a full-time, scout warrior for the Fremen, and she gets pregnant and essentially becomes the wife to Paul, and that's it. This, unless she's, attending school or doing something back in the city that he sends her to, but we don't know. We're not shown any of that. This screams to me of classic male writing forgetting female concerns. Did Herbert maybe consider Chani wanting to use birth control? Because I'm assuming they have birth control in the future. Or maybe she didn't want to continue with an accidental pregnancy at age 15. Do we get to know any of this? Obviously we don't. Likewise, what about her mother? We know Keynes is her father, but what about her mother? Where is she? Is she dead? Maybe they did say it, I just don't remember. But anyway, We don't know anything about Channy's opinions on this. We don't really know anything about Channy at all. And it's a shame, really, because she's such a cool character in that she doesn't just stand around moping all day like Paul. She does stuff, but it's just, I don't know. It seems like a lost opportunity on my part. I also don't understand why the Fremen have this polygamous marriage setup that doesn't appear to extend to polyamory. In truth, I can't make heads or tails of why it's there or what it's meant to imply, especially tied to that whole irritating bit with Hera, how women are property that are passed around when their man dies. Like, give me a break. Like, what is this? What time period is this supposed to be? Like, it's supposed to be in the future, not sometime in the past. Anyway, let's move on to the Bene Gesserit. Now, I love the fact that we have a powerful sect of all-female rulers. That is super cool. I love that they're involved politically. I just wish that we'd seen more of that. I wish that they'd shown more of that. Like, I wish Irulan was a Bene Gesserit, and a third of the book was her talking about doing this and what their goals are and what their purposes are, because it seems like their only purpose is to produce this male heir, and that is really frustrating. I mean, what's also annoying of the Bene Gesserit is that a lot of their focus and power is tied to fertility, as if women can't have any other concern. The Bene Gesserit Reverend Mothers are always female because they can control the sex of the fetuses and thus control bloodlines. Apparently a male one, the Kwisatz Haderach, or however you say it, would be too unwieldy, as that this person could access both male memory and female memory. This is where it gets really dumb. So much of this is tied to a very rigid traditional idea of male versus female and man versus women that as soon as you even suggest the idea of a trans person, this entire premise falls apart. Also, the idea that someone can alter the sex of their zygote, and it would have to be at the zygote phase before the cell even forms a blastocyst or a blastocyst to implant in the ovarian wall. So this is literally 2 days after they have sex, but they wouldn't even know that because sperm can live for 5 days in a uterus. So it doesn't make any sense. They do have complete control over their bodies, but it's absolutely ridiculous because they don't. It's asinine. I get it's a fantasy sci-fi in a way, but I'm just give me a break. Sorry, I find this aspect really stupid. Then we have the idea that Jessica loves the Duke so much she has a son for him. Why? Why can't he just have a freaking daughter? Are men more valuable? Oh, wait. Probably, since in the future, apparently, we still have primogeniture. And don't try to tell me it wasn't for this reason. It totally is. You don't see Irulan becoming empress until she marries, do you? She's not going to be the emperor. She's going to be the emperor's wife, regardless of the fact that she is the daughter of the empress. It's frustrating. It's frustrating. And I'm getting on a bit of a rant here, but that is one of the things that unpacking a novel sometimes does, is it introduces things that you didn't really think about when you read it before. So this whole thing leads me back to the last line of the book. I'm going to say it again. Well, we Channy, we who carry the name concubine, history would call us wives. This is laden with nonsense. It first implies that Jessica's loving relationship with the Duke wasn't valid because they weren't married, which is bullshit. And then it implies that because they were living common law, she was no better than a sex worker. And that comparison itself, making a wife more valuable than a concubine or a sex worker, denigrates sex work. The last line is just awful on 4 different levels, and I absolutely hate it, and I'm pretty sure that that's the reason why I never read any of the other Dune books. It's funny because I really enjoy reading the book until you get to the last line, and then I get really pissed off. So, thanks, Herbert. Thanks so much. Anyway, I said I wasn't going to tear it apart, but I guess I lied, because I'm a lying woman, I don't like how gender roles are handled in this book when you really get down into it, and now I'm annoyed. Will I read Dune again? Who knows, maybe. Maybe I will. I don't know. To be honest, if the new movies are really good, I'll probably just watch the movie. Will I let my daughters read it? If they're interested. And then we'll have a nice discussion about outdated gender roles and traditional norms and why those things are silly. So, thank you for watching. I hope if you love Dune, you don't think that I'm insulting it. I still think the book has merits. I just, certain parts of it are really dated and stupid. Go sandworms.